Russia's perspective on NATO's engagement with African Union and regional organizations. NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations has been a topic of interest for many nations around the world. One of these nations is Russia. The Russian perspective on NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations is an interesting topic and deserves to be discussed. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has expanded its engagement with the African Union and regional organizations in Africa. The alliance has provided training to African peacekeeping troops, supported the establishment of regional organizations, and contributed to peacekeeping missions on the continent. This has been welcomed by some African countries. However, Russia sees NATO's engagement with African Union and regional organizations differently. From Russia's perspective, NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations is a way for the alliance to expand its influence and encroach upon Russia's sphere of influence. Russia views the African continent as a strategic location for its interests and considers the expansion of NATO's engagement as a threat to its position. Russia has been critical of NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations, arguing that the expansion is destabilizing the continent. Russia believes that NATO is pursuing its own interests in Africa and is not interested in the welfare of the African people. Moscow has accused the alliance of attempting to control Africa's resources, particularly oil and gas. This is seen as a direct challenge to Russia's interest in African energy resources. Russia has also criticized NATO's involvement in peacekeeping missions on the continent. Moscow has argued that NATO's involvement in peacekeeping missions is undermining the role of the United Nations in maintaining peace and security in Africa. Russia has called for an increase in the role of the UN in peacekeeping operations, arguing that the UN is better placed to handle African conflicts. In addition to the above, Russia has advocated for the establishment of a multipolar world order, where no single nation or alliance dominates global affairs. Moscow believes that NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations is an attempt to promote a unipolar world order where the Western powers and their allies have the dominant role. Despite its criticism of NATO's engagement with the African Union and regional organizations, Russia has maintained a presence on the African continent. Moscow has been providing arms, training, and military support to African countries, particularly those which have tensions with the West. This has helped Russia in maintaining its influence on the continent. Furthermore, Russia has been trying to strengthen its economic ties with African countries. Moscow has been investing in African infrastructure projects, particularly those which have implications for Russia's strategic interests. This has been seen as an attempt by Russia to counter NATO's growing influence on the continent. Russia's perspective on NATO's engagement with African Union and regional organizations is important in understanding the geopolitics of the African continent. Moscow sees NATO's expansion into Africa as a direct challenge to its interests and has been critical of the alliance's actions. Nonetheless, Russia has maintained a presence on the African continent and has been working to counter NATO's influence. It remains to be seen how this will play out in the years to come. In conclusion, it is clear that Russia's perspective on NATO's engagement with African Union and regional organizations is an important one. Moscow sees the expansion of NATO's influence in Africa as a direct challenge to its interests and has been vocal in its criticism. Russia's continued presence on the African continent and its efforts to counter NATO's growing influence further highlight the importance of the issue. It will be interesting to see how the situation evolves in the coming years.